Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us once again on the State of Freedom.
We are so honored to be affiliate partners for General Michael Flynn's movie, Flynn, Deliver the Truth, Whatever the Cost. Support General Flynn and the State of Freedom by shopping the Flynn movie store directly from the button on our homepage at freedomstate.us or through our affiliate link, flynnmovie.com/TSOF podcast. On that site, you can purchase the DVD, which comes with a streaming link. You can pick up Flynn movie merchandise and get his complete 5GW book series. Well, today it's just Chris and me coming on to share some updates about the State of Freedom and to talk all things elections. We should have fun. I think we're in for a treat. It's been a while since it's been just the two of us, Chris. I'm looking forward to it. But before we get started, let me read the scripture of the day. It's Proverbs chapter 24, verses 11 and 12. And it says, "Go and rescue the perishing, be their savior. Why would you stand back and watch them stagger to their death? And why would you say, but it's none of my business? The one who knows you completely and judges your every motive is also the keeper of souls, and not just yours. He sees through your excuses and holds you responsible for failing to help those whose lives are threatened." And Chris, that hit me right between the eyes this morning when I say, we've had those recent interviews with Craig Sawyer and JJ Carrell. And it's true, we can no longer turn a blind eye to the evils that are happening in our nation at the hands of our government with our tax dollars. We absolutely cannot remain silent and we cannot stay on the sidelines. We all have a role to play, and I will encourage every listener today to spend some time with the Lord today. Ask Him to help you to be honest with Him and with yourself. Are you doing your part in protecting the children that are vulnerable? Whether they're children in your community who you know or those who have no advocate and no protection as they come across the border. Prayer is powerful, and we must be diligent in prayer. But Danielle chapter 11 tells us that the people who know their God will display strength and take action. And it's time that we show the world that we know God, and not just by our words, but by our action.
Yeah. What you said, Danielle, it's none of my business. There are an awful lot of people out there who have convinced themselves that unless something directly and immediately affects their own life, that it's none of their business. But we've reached such a point now with regard to the condition of our state, our community, and our country, the sinister influences that are invading us, that it is all of our business. It's all of our business. And we can be very, very good at rationalizing inaction. And we can convince ourselves, but that is why it is so important, your admonition, to spend time with the Lord and really reflect deeply on whether or not we're doing all that we can do to preserve freedom and liberty, not only for ourselves, but for the next generation. That is the ultimate question. And doing that over the next 2.5 weeks before these elections, if there was ever a time to start, I think it's now.
It is now. And, we can't forget that we're going to be held responsible. I think JJ Carrell and Craig Sawyer both said it in their own ways, but we will be held responsible. This is our country. It's a government for, by, and of the people. And if that's true, then we're responsible for what happens on our soil with our money.
Absolutely. With our money, yes. And we all have to get engaged. And speaking of being engaged, you and I have been engaged on some things going on behind the scenes with the State of Freedom, and also have been preparing some recommendations for the imminent elections. And I'm looking forward to getting into that today and talking about that as well.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Well, if you are not yet following us on X or on Rumble, please do that. It's where most of our information and clips are going, where our opinions are flying wild. We're also on Facebook and Instagram. All of the links, I think, are in the show notes. If not, they're on freedomstate.us. But on X, we are Freedom State US. And on Rumble, we are TSOF Podcast. And when you go there, you'll see that we've been experimenting with video, and we're working toward making the switch from audio only to video. We teased that at the beginning of the year. It's been a little bit more difficult, challenging learning curve process than we expected, but we want to do that. And we would like to start also doing some live streams. We're planning on that. But in order to do that, we also need some equipment and some software upgrades. So we want to come to you and say that we will need some one-time support as well as regular monthly support. Our aim is to make the State of Freedom listener sustained so we can keep bringing impactful, high-quality interviews and the latest political and policy developments in Louisiana and at the national level, actually all across the country. So if you like what we're doing, please go to freedomstate.us if you're able to and support us. Make either a monthly or one-time gift. If you prefer writing a check, our P.O. Box is listed on the website, but it's P.O. Box 861, Berg, Louisiana, 70343.
Yeah. And we have to keep in mind, Danielle, for our listeners have to keep in mind that the State of Freedom is a different entity from LACAG. The State of Freedom has a unique priority within our business structure. The State of Freedom is designed to inform citizens across Louisiana about issues that are so fundamentally important to them, and also to talk to them about various candidates who are running for office and about who is good, who is bad. But what we're asking, the reason why we are asking for your financial support at this time is because we are trying to take the State of Freedom to a level, both with regard to our technical infrastructure and our reach, to a level where we can more easily and more broadly spread the voice of constitutional freedom in Louisiana and beyond. And with your help, we can do that. I don't believe, Danielle, that there is another voice like the State of Freedom in Louisiana. There really is not. That is uncompromising in both its loyalty to Louisiana citizens and in its devotion to constitutional principles. There's just not another one. And, we were ranked number 4 a few months back by a very reputable ranking company that we were listed as number 4 of the must listen to political podcasts in Louisiana. So we are gaining traction and doing a lot of great things, but we have to have your financial support to be able to continue. And we just got to have it. It's just one of those kind of unpleasant realities that when you want to do things and you want to expand, it costs money. We need infrastructure. So please prayerfully consider making either a one-time donation to the State of Freedom or becoming a monthly member. Our prices are very reasonable, not going to break the bank, and it will help us to continue to perform our valuable work. We need it.
Well, thanks, Chris. And people can just select however much they're able to give. So I don't even know if we have a suggested donation level. So we'll leave that between you and the Lord. And Chris, today is episode number 241. So we have been steady and hard at this for quite some time now. We got started in April of last year. So we've surpassed the year mark and we're still going strong. And
wow, unbelievable.
I know.
Isn't that unbelievable? Where does the time go?
It is. I'm just so honored and feel so blessed to have this opportunity and to be able to do this work with you.
Likewise.
Well, now let's move on to the elections, Chris. We are in the throes of elections already. And look, anecdotal reports here in Terrebonne are that early voting has been sky high with people wrapped around the building consistently. A reminder to everyone that the last day to early vote, if you're going to do that, is October 29th. And obviously, Election Day is on a Tuesday, as always, and it is November 5th. And I guess, why don't we just get into the endorsements that LACAG PAC's making? If we start there, the first endorsement on the list is the most important race in the country, but really the most important race in the world, I believe, in our lifetime. And that is for president and vice president. Obviously, our support is 117,000% behind Donald Trump and JD Vance. We are talking about the future of our republic and the future of freedom worldwide.
Absolutely. And to say that our support of Donald Trump and JD Vance is a no-brainer is probably an insult to no-brainers, because there simply is no comparison, not only in this election, but if Donald Trump does not win this election, and God willing, through a lot of prayer and hard work, he will, it's going to be very difficult to see how the republic recovers. We can't take another 4 years of Biden-Harris. So please make sure that you vote. And it's not enough, by the way, Danielle, for people to say, oh, I'm for Trump. That's absolutely valueless if you're for Trump, but you don't take the time to go vote for Trump. you may as well not even say it. So please make sure that you vote. It is critically important, the most important election of my lifetime, and I would believe yours as well.
Yeah, and I know our listeners agree with us, but voting is not only a responsibility, but it's a very high privilege, and we should take that seriously. Well, Chris, let's get into the congressional races. We have a couple that we are supporting. First, for us, is the race for Congress in District 6, and our support is fully behind Elbert Guillory. If you recall, listeners, this is the district that our good friend Paul Hurd challenged at the Supreme Court as unconstitutional. It's a giant stripe across the state from the top left down to the right. It was intended and drawn to be a minority Democratic district, becoming the second minority Democratic district in the state for us. And Elbert is running to ensure that this district does not go to the Democrats. Let me list out the parishes that this district runs through. I'm not sure that it covers any of these districts fully because of the way that it was sliced and diced, but it touches these parishes. So they include Caddo, DeSoto, Natchitoches, Rapides, Avoyelles, St. Landry, Point Coupee, and West and East Baton Rouge.
Yeah. And a number of these parishes, the Acadiana parishes down here that you mentioned, Danielle, Elbert Guillory has an advantage because he served in those parishes formerly as a state rep and as a state senator and is very broadly respected in those areas. So to that extent, those significant parts of the district will benefit him. Secondly, even though this is a racially gerrymandered district, the people in the know who I've spoken to who really looked closely at the way it was drawn really shows that when you break it down to chronic Republicans who vote versus chronic Democrats who vote, it's about 51-48, which means that Elbert Guillory needs to win a relatively small percentage of African-American vote in order to win this election. It's not nearly as unfavorable to him as you might think when you say, oh, it's a gerrymandered district and it's supposed to favor Democrats. And when you look at Black men and even significant numbers of Black women who are moving toward Trump, if that translates down ballot to Elbert Guillory, then he is in a very good position to win this race. And let me tell you what's on the line in this Elbert Guillory versus the diehard Democrat Cleo Fields in this race. We're talking about the balance of power in the United States Congress. We have a razor-thin majority still in the U.S. Congress. And I know there are a lot of people who criticize, well, the Republicans aren't doing anything and we're complaining about the Republicans. Believe me, if you want to see a massive difference in what's occurring now and what will be occurring when the Democrats take control, let Cleo Fields win this congressional race because he is a dream candidate for Kamala Harris and Joe Biden. It is essential that Elbert Guillory win this race and preserve the Republican majority in Congress. That's why, as you said a few minutes ago, Danielle, it is the most important congressional race in the country.
Well, and Chris, just a couple points on that. I think, look, I'll just be honest. If this race goes to Cleo Fields, it is on the hands of Jeff Landry and our legislature because that's who did this. That's absolutely who did this. So voters in that district, I pray that they get out and vote for Elbert Guillory. I also want to say that truthfully, I don't think the Democrats who are diehard Democrats have a whole lot to get out for this election cycle. I don't think Kamala's inspiring very much right now. So I would also wonder if the Democratic vote will be somewhat suppressed this cycle just because she's not an exciting candidate. I don't think people are expecting anything new out of her.
Yeah, she's a singularly uninspiring candidate, Danielle, and you're exactly right. This reconfigured 6th congressional district is Jeff Landry's district. There's no question about that. If Cleo Fields win this seat because of some political favor that Jeff Landry owed to him while all this was done and Elbert Guillory loses it and we lose control of the U.S. Congress, then Jeff Landry will take most of the responsibility for that. And it's unfortunate. Right now, we just have to focus on winning the race. So Elbert Guillory, vote for him. If you're in this district, encourage your family and friends to vote for him. He is a good man, and he will hold fast to conservative principles. And most importantly, he will be a real Trump ally in the Congress. If we lose control of the Congress, then the U.S. Congress will be a constant thorn in President Trump's side. So we have to maintain control of the Congress. Elbert will help us do that.
Yeah. And if I'm busy passing out blame here, I'll also pass a little bit of blame to Secretary of State Landry, because whenever the Supreme Court said that they would make a decision on it, she said that if they made a decision on it, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Chris, this is what I recall from our conversation with Paul Hurd, she wouldn't have time to make the necessary changes to the ballots. And so if she would have played ball, this district could look a lot different.
And you're exactly right, Danielle. Part of this does go on Nancy Landry, because she had an opportunity to change the ballots. She had an opportunity to come together and make something happen here, but she told the U.S. Supreme Court that she would not have time to do it. It would upset the progress of the election. So the Supreme Court deferred to her. So here we are with this unconstitutional district that in all likelihood will be declared unconstitutional by the U.S. Supreme Court after this term is up, whoever wins. But guess what? You can do a lot of damage or a lot of good in 2 years. So this seat, which will probably only exist for 2 years, is so important that the right person be in that seat. And that's Elbert Guillory.
Agree 100%. And when Elbert came on the show, Chris, he mentioned that he believed that it was an unconstitutional district and it would be a short-lived district as it stands. But if anyone wants a refresher on what Elbert stands for, you can check out our interview with him. That was episode 199.
Yeah, I recommend that.
Yeah, it was a good one. Okay, next up is the congressional race for District 2. This is the district I live in, and we're supporting Clay Higgins. Obviously, he's the incumbent, and he has a great relationship with President Trump and with Speaker Johnson. He's been a very forceful proponent of getting all the J6 evidence out to the public, which is important, extremely important to us. He is highly involved, as many of you know, in the investigation into the assassination attempts on President Trump. The man is bold. And he is probably doing more for this state, more for us, more for America than most in Congress right now. I would make that statement. And District 2, of course, everything shifted after this past legislative special session on redistricting. So District 2 now covers parts of Kalamazoo, all of Jefferson Davis, Acadia, most of Lafayette. It covers St. Martin, Cameron, Vermilion, Iberia, St. Mary, St. Martin, Terrebonne, and the northern part of Lafourche.
Yeah, if you live in those areas, make sure you vote for Clay Higgins. Danielle, few congressmen have done more to raise the warning bells about the weaponization of the Department of Justice, the weaponization of the federal government more generally. And he has boldly stood up against that. And I know he will continue to fight that when he's reelected. But we are very pleased with Congressman Higgins. And boy, if he were to lose this race, which hopefully that won't happen, he seems to be in very good shape. That would be a major loss for constitutional conservatism and freedom in the U.S. Congress. So Clay Higgins, clearly this is a no-brainer endorsement.
It is. And our last interview with him was episode 111. It's been some time now, but if you want to check it out, that's the one it was, if you want a refresher there. Next up on our endorsement list is Public Service Commissioner for District 2, and we are supporting Julie Quinn. The parishes covered for District 2 for this PSC race include partially or wholly Ascension, Assumption, East Baton Rouge, East Feliciana, Iberville, Lafayette, Lafourche, Livingston, Point Coupee, St. Martin, Terrebonne, West Baton Rouge, West Feliciana, and Chris, I'll let you get into why, but before you get into why, would you tell us what the Public Service Commissioners do?
The Public Service Commission, it really, you could describe it almost as sort of a consumer advocacy board. Their principal responsibility is to make sure that Louisiana citizens are not charged usurious or oppressive rates for their electricity bills, their utility bills, their water bills. And these big, powerful utility companies, their principal goal, and not knocking that. We live in a free market economy. They want to make money, but their primary concern generally is not making sure that the utility rates of Louisiana citizens are affordable. That's where the Public Service Commission comes in to sort of be a go-between the citizens and the big utility companies and special interests who set those rates. That's why the PSC is so very important. And we are endorsing Julie Quinn. The PAC is endorsing Julie Quinn for the race because the Public Service Commission will invariably, because they deal with energy issues, with electricity issues, even with grid issues, they're going to be dealing in something called carbon capture sequestration and whether we should continue to invest taxpayer dollars in it. So the PSC deals with this sort of issue. And Julie's opponent, Jean-Paul Cusson, sat in the House as chairman of the House Natural Resources Committee. And he has demonstrated in every action that he took as chairman of that board that he is fully in bed with the carbon capture sequestration lobby, the carbon capture racket, and did nothing in his committee to stand up or protect Louisiana citizens who seem to be increasingly opposed to this. And I'll give you two examples. The first example was a bill on eminent domain that came before his committee. And this bill simply would have rolled back the right that private corporations currently have basically to seize property of Louisiana citizens to put these carbon capture sequestration projects on their property. That is a fundamental violation of basic property rights. It should have been rolled back, but he did not let it happen. Secondly, the decision about who makes the decision about whether these big billion-dollar carbon capture pipelines are going to be going into a parish. Should it be the state or should it be the local and governing authorities within those parishes? Well, there was a bill that would have required local decision-making from within each parish about whether or not they want to have these projects. And that bill also was killed in the committee because Jean-Paul Cusson was not strong on it and just let it die. And then he helped to usher in all of the pro-carbon capture sequestration bills, and everything that I've seen about him suggests that he is all on board with it. Julie Quinn, on the other hand, absolutely has said that she does not believe carbon capture sequestration has been proven to be effective. And certainly we should not be investing billions and billions of dollars of our taxpayer money in it. And certainly people shouldn't have their private property seized for that purpose. And certainly local municipalities should be able to make these decisions. I think there's a clear distinction between these two candidates on that core issue. And the PAC has chosen to endorse Julie Quinn on this issue. That seat on the Public Service Commission, because of the issues that they deal with, is massively important. And I feel much more comfortable with Quinn than with Cusson for the reasons that I just stated.
And Chris, just for our listeners who may want to look into those votes for themselves, that was in the 2023 legislative regular session when Cusson was heading up the Natural Resources Committee. I remember those votes very distinctly because as LACAG lobbying, we were very, very strongly against this eminent domain. In fact, he had the opportunity, I think you mentioned this, to overturn it, but instead stood in the way of that getting overturned.
Of that getting done. Yeah. It's by the way, the eminent domain bill, Danielle, from 2023, the one that would have rolled that back was HB 10. And the bill that would have conferred authority to make these decisions on local and municipal authorities was HB 353. Somebody wants to go back and look at the testimony, because I testified emphatically on both of those bills. And I'll never forget all of the people from Maurepas and from other parts of the state who were in there, just every single one of them. We don't want this. We don't want this. We don't want this in our parish. We don't want this in our parish. Let us make these decisions. No, fell on deaf ears.
Yeah. And Chris, what you have described, I mean, those two decisions are pretty reflective of whether someone is going to fight for the people or fight for big business. Are they going to fight for, what's best for these special interest groups? Are they going to listen to what the people actually want and be a faithful representative to the will of the people, not who is funding their campaign or not who may be their buddy? I don't know. I'm not trying to issue any kind of indictment against Jean-Paul Cusson. He's actually a very lovely guy to speak with. He's a very nice person. But what I can say is I'm not convinced that he would represent the interests of the people based on this track record.
Absolutely. And I don't know him personally. I'm sure he is a very nice person, which is why you and I never get into personal issues. We never attack people personally. This is all about the issues and all about the record. And that's what we're doing. And his record simply does not recommend him for this position.
All right. Next up is a judgeship race for the Louisiana Court of Appeal. It's the First Circuit, Second District, Subdistrict 1, Division C. Imagine putting that on your business card. Okay, we're supporting Kelly Balfour, and this First Circuit Court of Appeal is made up of 12 sitting judges and has jurisdiction over 16 parishes in the southeastern part of the state. It covers the parishes of Ascension, Assumption, East Baton Rouge, East Feliciana, Iberville, Lafourche, Livingston, Point Coupee, St. Helena, St. Mary, St. Tammany, Tangipahoa, Terrebonne, Washington, West Baton Rouge, and West Feliciana. Chris, tell us what this judge's responsibilities would be and why the race is so important.
Every case, whether it's civil or criminal, Danielle, that is appealed from the parishes that you just ticked off there, go to the First Circuit Court of Appeal. So when something's appealed, one of the parties is saying, we don't like the decision that the trial court made. We think it was unfair. We need you to review it and consider it. And this is criminal issues, constitutional issues, civil issues. I've known Kelly Balfour for a long time. I know that he is eminently fair in the decisions that he makes. I know that he respects the Constitution and the rule of law, does not play political favorites, and I just feel he would be very good on the First Circuit. And somebody has to lose and somebody has to win. But I guarantee you, even if you lose in a decision that he makes or is a part of, you'll at least understand the reasoning behind it and that conclusion was thoughtfully reached. So I think Kelly Balfour would be wonderful on the First Circuit, and this is an easy endorsement for us.
Awesome. All right. Next up is for Mayor President of Baton Rouge. We're supporting Sid Edwards. Chris, this is your home turf. Tell us about the race. What's at stake? Tell us why the candidates, how they stack up against one another.
Well, I think I like Sid Edwards. He's a conservative Republican. His primary platform when it comes to business and taxes is to reduce the tax burden on local businesses and find a way to cut spending. How often do you hear any candidate ever talk about that anymore? Cutting spending. You never hear it. And that will help our business climate enormously if we can do that. With regard to crime, his goal is to hire 100 new police officers to aggressively fight crime, but also do it in a way that involves community policing, where the police know the people who are in their community and develop relationships with those people in their community. I think that's a great approach. And one thing that I like about, and people typically, I don't necessarily know why, don't normally associate conservative ideology with this plank in his platform, but he wants to build a psychological facility used with the help of local and federal officials and local funds in order to help people who are on the streets, homeless, don't have anywhere to go, who have true mental and psychological issues, to help them get back on their feet and to help them do what they need to do. There's a lot of veterans that are walking around on the street, Danielle, who don't have the access to the care that they need. It's truly sad. And I like the idea that is something that he would consider to help people. But he's a very good man. He's a former football coach for many, many years, very respected member of the community. And really, he's the only choice in the race. His opponents, the incumbent Sharon Broome, is absolutely incompetent. And the other Democrat in the race is absolutely dangerous. Ted James, his legislative voting record reads like a screed against everything that conservatives believe in and stand for, from allowing or wanting men to participate in girls' sports, to weakening law enforcement, to taxes, to everything you can name. Ted James has been on the wrong side of it. And he's trying to convince people that he is a middle of the road type of guy. He can work with both sides. Ted James is a diehard leftist ideologue, and people need to understand that and not be fooled by what he is saying. So not only is he bad, Broome, as I said, is incompetent. She needs to go. Sid Edwards has some great ideas, and I think will help to move this city forward in the right way. Oh, the last point I wanted to make about Sid, perhaps my favorite part of his platform, he wants to reduce all the regulatory burdens and all the bureaucracy that currently are required for just businesses who want to come here to be permitted. It is such a laborious process. I can see why some businesses might get demoralized and quit halfway through the process because there's so much red tape that's unnecessary, so many regulatory burdens, and he wants to streamline that process and make it easier for businesses to get permitted and go to work.
I'm excited to share a fantastic opportunity for State of Freedom listeners who are interested in investing in precious metals or even starting a home-based business in the precious metals industry. Metal Stacks is a precious metals collectors club where you can buy your metals at the best prices on the market, actual dealer cost. They are beating the big sites. They have no credit card fees and no minimums. If you're just interested in purchasing metals at a great price, visit metalstacks.com/dwalker. Get to shopping. That helps me out. I get the commission. You can also refer people to Metal Stacks for an additional income. If you're interested in learning about the referral business aspect of Metal Stacks, email me directly at Danielle@freedomstate.us for more information. But I think, Chris, one of the things that you brought out is that it's important that we not only listen to what candidates are saying, but we have to look at their track record, right? Because their actions are going to speak louder than words. And this is one of the reasons I want to see the political parties blown up, because people need to be able to stand on their own ideas. They need to be able to stand on their own values, and they need to not have anybody else's coattails or any template to run on. They need to be able to say, this is who I am, this is what I'm about, and they have to stand there with it, come what may. And I truly think, Chris, based on what you say, if the Democrats actually understood what Ted James stood for, they wouldn't be voting for him either. Nobody wants higher taxes. Nobody wants men in women's restrooms except for like the 2 or 3 men who want to go into women's restrooms.
Exactly. Most thoughtful Democrats don't want men participating in women's sports. That's a no-brainer for most people. But he couldn't bring himself to support that. And so, one other thing I wanted to mention here, because I do think that it's anecdotal, but I do think it's revealing. You remember J6, Danielle, when 1 million or more patriots descended upon Washington, D.C., the overwhelming majority of whom were simply there to gather to protest peacefully at the Capitol over the 2020 election. Well, there was a business owner who owns Rouse's, the supermarkets down here, very successful businessman. He and I think maybe his wife or somebody went to that rally, did absolutely nothing wrong. They were there in attendance and support. Well, they get back home and Ted James is calling for a boycott of their business. He's trying to put Rouse's out of business because these 2 Americans had the audacity to attend the J6 rally in Washington, D.C. That is great insight into the perspective and the philosophy of Ted James. And he's not someone who is going to bring this community together, I promise you.
Well, I can tell you one thing, Chris, Rouse's still seems to be alive and kicking. They're doing just fine.
Amen to that.
All right. Now for some more local races. First up is the Livingston Parish School Board District 2 race. We're supporting Bob Seals. Chris, tell us about that race.
I met Bob Seals a few months back. Really, really like him. You know, he's Jenny Seals' brother, who was a great conservative, former candidate for state rep, and just a close friend of LACAG. And so she introduced me to him. I visited with him for a couple of hours one day. He is very strong for parental rights. He is very sensitive to federal overreach on this Title IX issue, where the federal government is trying to impose these radical pedagogical concepts on children in school, from critical race theory, queer theory, all of those things. He's strong against that and understands how important it is. And as I said, he is a fighter for parents, for parental rights, and we need that on the school boards. Just a good man. I think he'll do a great job.
Yeah. And, one thing that JJ Carrell said was that we need more strong men to stand up and speak up. And I just love that he's doing that. I love seeing strong men with principals getting on school boards. There's one in Terrebonne Parish that we're supporting as well for District 6 school board. It's Bud Cluche. He is a sitting member of the school board right now. He was appointed when someone vacated the seat midterm because I think they won another election last year in the 23 cycle. So since being on the board, Chris, Bud, he's led the efforts for our parish to defend our state stance on Title IX compliance, protecting our children. He's assisted in defining updated policies to clearly inform our parents in Terrebonne of their rights to opt out of vaccines, which is really important. We have underscored that so much here. He's working for transparency in school board matters, which is fantastic. And he supports Cade Brumley, the state superintendent's initiatives with the science of reading, foundational math, and being college and career ready. He's a strong supporter of bus drivers, which we're having a heck of a time finding bus drivers. I know there's a big shortage problem and they're under a lot of strain and a lot of stress. So I appreciate that so much, Bud. So if you're in District 6, this is a no-brainer. You vote for Bud. His name is Louis Bud Cluche on the ballot.
I think I can see a T-shirt one day, vote Bud.
He's a great guy. Absolutely great guy. He and his wife are a big part of We the People Bayou community. They're great patriots and we love them.
And his wife, Vicky, is the sister of the great Representative Kathy Edmonston. Is that right?
That's right. That's right. So yeah, good people stick together.
Yet another reason to vote
exactly. For him. All right. Now for some Baton Rouge races. We've got the judge of City Court Division C in the city of Baton Rouge, Niles Hamer.
Yes, Niles Hamer running for Baton Rouge City Court judge. The city court judges preside over misdemeanors, DWI cases, simple battery cases, also civil cases that don't exceed a certain value. And I've known Niles for many, many years. And like Kelly, I think that he will do a tremendous job on the bench. He tries to be fair to both sides. He's very respectful and has a great knowledge of the law and the Constitution. So Niles Hamer is the one for us on this.
Awesome. Now, District 1 of the Baton Rouge Metro Council, we've endorsed Penny Mae Landry.
As I told you pre-show, Danielle, Penny Mae Landry.
I answer to Danny, too.
Okay, right. All right.
It depends on who it is.
You're right. and what mood you're in. But Penny Mae Landry is one of these citizens who is so engaged, particularly with regard to the expenditure of our money and the contracts that the city enters into with private companies. She not only believes in government transparency, she works to make sure that the government is transparent for the benefit of the people. She is a true citizen advocate. And I'll tell you that the Baton Rouge Metro Council will benefit enormously if she wins this race. She is just an outstanding citizen. If we had 10 of her, we could probably change Baton Rouge overnight. That's how high I am on Penny Mae Landry.
That's so awesome. It's amazing to see how, just one person who is willing to dig into the details, one person who's willing to speak up. We say that, we often say that courage is contagious, but also curiosity is contagious. And that's something that we need in our local governments is curiosity. Why are you doing it this way? Why are we spending this money? Why can't we look at some other options? I
And
think
she will stand up, Danielle, and I've seen her do it so many times before legislative committees and before the Metro Council and directly challenge, why are you spending taxpayer money on this? Why are you doing this? Isn't this wasteful? Why are you squandering money here? Why can't we do it this way? You talk about someone who will be an absolute vigilant steward of our money. That's Penny Mae Landry.
oh, I love it. I wish we'd get a few Penny Mae Landrys in Terrebonne.
Yes,
All right.
absolutely. There's a reason why her first name is Penny, because she watches the money.
Good girl. All right. District 2 of the Baton Rouge Metro Council, we're supporting Dina Johnson.
I don't know Dina personally, but Penny Landry said that she is a good person and a solid candidate and will work with her very well on the council. That's really all I know about her. But when I know Penny Landry, when she says something like that, that's good enough for me. So Dina Johnson is our candidate for that Metro Council district.
District 2. All right. And then next up is Constable of the City of Baton Rouge. We're supporting Terica Williams. Chris, what does a constable do?
Well, the city constable is basically responsible for certain law enforcement functions similar to other police officers. They can make arrests, traffic citations, and that sort of thing. Pretty low level, but they work closely with the courts to serve papers and subpoenas and serve judicial process. They're very important for the effective and smooth functioning of our government and the judicial process, really. And she has proven in her first term that she can do it very effectively. She works very well with others. I hear that the morale on her staff is very high, and she's just a very delightful person. And she's running against, by the way, Danielle, the one and only Representative Denise Marcel, soon to be former Representative Denise Marcel. And Denise, while I have a reasonably good personal rapport with Denise, Denise is about as far apart from us politically, both on the local and on the state level, that it's possible to be. And so for that reason, and because I know Terica personally, I know how she is, I believe that she is the right person for this job.
Well, that's great. And you said she's delightful. She's a delightful person. We need more delightful people in government. That's for sure.
Yeah, you would
especially
think that.
People who are dealing with the courts, people who are dealing with parking and the courts. For that to be delightful is just amazing.
You would believe that if you met her, I promise you.
That's awesome. All right. Now we're going to shift gears and talk about some ballot measures. The first one is a statewide constitutional amendment related to the earmarking of any revenue generated through offshore wind farms. The amendment is aiming to dedicate these funds to coastal restoration. And Chris, you and I both think that the idea of offshore wind farms is foolhardy and a giant waste of money, effort, and probably polluting the Gulf and killing a lot of seagulls. So while we're not proponents of the stupid wind farms, and I'll just call them that because that's what I think they are. We've seen them destroy property in the Northeast, I think off the coast of Rhode Island. It's already proven to be a disaster and an epic failure. Yet Louisiana, in all of our wisdom, says, let's go for it, folks. That's what we need as wind farms. But this vote is not on the wind farms. It's about any revenue related to the wind farms.
Right. You're exactly right, Danielle. I cannot stand carbon capture sequestration. I think it's an unproven racket. I 100% agree with Julie Quinn that it has not been proven to be an effective source or reliable source of energy. But as you said, that's not what this amendment is about. This amendment simply says that any money that happens to be derived from the development and the production of these windmills that we're talking about through the use of, alternative renewable energy. If you derive revenue from it, that revenue has to go into a coastal restoration fund. It cannot go into the general fund. That's all the amendment says. I believe in coastal restoration. I know that you do. And to the extent that what we believe, fool's enterprise may on some level be profitable or generate some revenue, I would agree that should go into the Coastal Restoration Fund and be used strictly for that purpose. rather than into a general fund where the risk that it can be squandered or used for something else. So that's, by the way, we were originally, Danielle, on this amendment, we were an original no, because I couldn't get around the fact that I can't stand carbon capture sequestration so much.
But Chris, this is wind. This is wind. I was going to clarify. This is about wind farms, isn't it? Or is it about carbon capture?
Oh, I'm sorry. This is not directly about carbon capture. Danielle, you're exactly right. I was researching. This is about renewable energy, revenues derived from renewable energy through the use of these wind farms in the Gulf and that sort of thing. You're exactly right. And again, as you said, they have proven to be a complete and total disaster. We don't believe they're going to be profitable, but to the extent that they do generate revenue, we don't really think they should be up there. We don't want it to be anywhere in our state. But if they are, and they do produce revenue, then that should go into the Coastal Restoration Fund. And thank you for clarifying that, Danielle.
Yeah, no problem. No problem. There's a lot to cover here, and it's easy to get our wires crossed. And on the wind farm, I just can't get over it because it's taking, I would imagine that they take up space that could be used for oil and gas leases. It's probably inhibiting our offshore fishermen from doing what they need to do. I could be wrong on that, and I would welcome someone to come on to the show and talk to us about what all the impacts of these wind farms would be to the Gulf, because I don't think that there's a positive impact to be seen.
And by the way, Danielle, you realize that the ultimate justification for all of these renewable energy rackets is to reduce harmful carbon emissions into the environment. That's what it's all about, to get to net zero by 2030. But these wind farms, these wind turbines, and all the energy it takes to construct them and to run them and to rebuild them and to replace them emits more carbon into the atmosphere than would ever be saved through their use. It is just such an exercise in bureaucratic illogic.
I mean, can you imagine the tugboats that are going out there to service those wind farms? Are they run on wind? I don't think so. It's sailboats out there to work on the wind farms. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. We'll get off this topic because I could camp out here all day. Okay. Next up is a few ballot measures specific to Baton Rouge. The first two are proposed amendments to the East Baton Rouge Parish Home Rule Charter. And you are a no on those, Chris.
Because these amendments, they want to change the definition of certain positions, chief administrative officer to city parish manager. And it's like, first of all, there's no need to change those names. Why don't you have a sit down with the person who is the chief administrative officer and say, look, here's what you're doing that's not right. Here's what you're doing. So we're going to expand your responsibilities here. There's no need to change the name. I look at this as an opportunity for more bureaucracy in our local government and ultimately even more expenditure of taxpayer money. This amendment is not necessary, and it's potentially adverse, potentially harmful.
Okay. And there's two of those, right? Two amendments to the Home Rule Charter. Do they both do kind of the same thing?
They both do kind of the same thing. And I believe that they're both no, because they both run the risk of increasing bureaucracy in our government.
Got it. All right. Next is a measure for the city of Baton Rouge, a proposed special ad valorem tax. Chris, I'm not surprised that you were a no on that.
Well, I looked at it pretty closely because this ad valorem tax would fund the firefighters. It would fund the firefighter services. And I made it very clear in our opposition, we love the firefighters. We believe in the firefighters. But the number one priority is to tighten up our belt in local government, to learn how to be fiscally and administratively responsible with what you already have and what you are already spending before we authorize the expenditure of additional money through taxpayers. So while we love our firefighters, we've got to get our ducks in a row, and you have to demonstrate that you can use our tax dollars and steward our tax dollars in a wise and efficient way before we authorize or approve of any additional tax increases. That's where we are.
Well, that makes sense to me. All right. Last are two parish-wide recreation and park committee propositions in East Baton Rouge. Those are also no-goes for you.
Both of those would renew taxpayer dollars to continue to fund all the Breck parks. And first of all, many of the Breck parks that I see around are not very, very well run, not very efficiently run. And also Breck itself was exposed not too long ago by Rolf McCollister and a couple of others for just this fiscal recklessness, fiscal inefficiency. And, so again, the same doubts about whether or not this government agency is using our tax dollars in a way that is wise and that maximizes our benefit. So when they learn how to run their operation in a way that is efficient, that serves the taxpayer, then we will look at renewing money for the Breck parks. So hopefully this will give them an incentive. If this fails, we'll give them an incentive to get their fiscal ducks in a row and then come back to the table for money.
Got it. All right. Well, that wraps us up. I know there's a lot more to be voted on in the state by specific parishes. Different municipalities have other measures, but these are the ones that we weighed in on. If you have any questions about ballot measures or other things, different candidates, feel free to reach out. Of course, we don't know everybody in the state or all the situations happening in the state, but if you email chris@lacag.org, I know, Chris, you'd be willing to take a look at it and try and give somebody some advice.
Absolutely.
You've got friends all over the state, so usually we can kind of get to an answer. In most places, it seems there's an Alexander in almost every corner of this state. I know that.
Yes, I've got friends in low, middle, and high places. But yes, and also, Danielle, simply before we go, I just want to reiterate, I know you might have something else you wanted to talk about, but we got to continue to encourage each other as we move forward over the next 2 or 3 weeks, not just you and I, but all of us, because the level of anxiety and the level of stress is just going to continue to increase as we get closer to this most important election. So we got to stay close to the Lord. We got to continue to fight. We have to encourage and nurture each other.
Yeah, very well said, Chris. I mean, this morning I was listening, sitting in prayer, and I just felt like the Lord was saying that when we spend the time in communion with Him, that's where the deep abiding peace comes from. And we can hear the screeching and the craziness that's going on around us, but it doesn't have to touch our heart in a way that causes us to shrink back in fear, or no anxiety has to happen if we are synced in with the Lord, if we're anchored to Him. We know where our help comes from, and it's not from the government and it's not from the news. It's from the Lord and from each other. And so I agree with you 100%. Let's be in unity. I think there's a lot of just spiritual activity right now, trying to divide people, trying to cause tension and chaos in relationships that have really no problems. I think that the spirit of division is at work right now because of the political season. So just keep your eyes open to that, folks.
Well said.
As far as it depends on you, be at peace with all people. I think that's exactly where we need to be. We don't need to give the devil a foothold.
Yeah. And try to wrap our arms around really what St. Paul said, because it's true when you really think about it, that the Lord has not given us a spirit of fear, but of love and power and a sound mind. So Paul didn't say the Lord did not give us a spirit of fear unless this circumstance exists, or unless this is going on, or unless you have this worry or this doubt. No, he said, in all circumstances, the Lord has given you a spirit of love, power, and a sound mind. That is so extraordinarily deep and true.
Yeah, it is. And Chris, before we go, I just want to make a few housekeeping announcements for the team. The Glenn Baker documentary is now out, so we'll have the link to that in the show notes, our affiliate link. So that'll help us out. If you were planning to buy the movie anyway, go ahead and get it through our website or get it through our show notes. The same thing for Invaded. I don't think we have an affiliate link for them, but JJ Carrell's films are so powerful, and we would really appreciate it if you would help share that episode in particular far and wide, because it's too important. This issue is so very damning to our country. And I just really would encourage you, if there's someone, if there are a few people that you can share it with, if you can share that episode on your social media, I think it's incumbent on all of us, as we said, if now that we know what's going on, now that we know the extent of the depravity and the horrors, it's our responsibility to make sure that we're not silent about it. So please share that on your social media and do whatever you can to bring it to the awareness of our elected officials. I know I tweeted something at AG Mural about this because I think, she's already suing Mayorkas, but she should be suing him for this.
Yeah.
I don't know what the jurisdiction is, but let's go ahead and find a way to sue him for this.
Look, absolutely. No question about it. He is just absolutely, a failed and miserable man, and someone who can sit there and completely lie about what's really going on in order to advance an agenda of his operatives. And don't think for one second that he is not being operated and controlled from people who are in a much, much higher position than he is.
It's extremely evil. It's all extremely evil.
It's all evil.
And I'll just mention one other thing that if you haven't yet watched it, or General Flynn's movie is also available on our website through our affiliate link. I think that's a great backdrop to what we're facing. It's a great backdrop to the extent of lawfare going on in our country, not just with General Flynn and not just with President Trump, but you think about the J6ers that don't have the mouthpiece, that don't have the ability to get their voice out as much. And they're really suffering under the weight of extraordinary legal bills and battles and stress. So take a look at General Flynn's movie if you'd like as well. That's on our homepage and in the show notes, and his books about fifth generation warfare are there as well. What incredible tools they are for us to know how to be prepared, for us to understand what we're fighting against. He makes it very clear we're not fighting against flesh and blood, but against powers and principalities and rulers of darkness in high places. But some of those inhabit people. And so we just have to be aware of what's going on. But we love you all. We couldn't be doing what we're doing without you. Thank you so much for tuning in faithfully. We are just overwhelmed with gratitude for the opportunity to speak to you, to bring the truth to you, to bring our perspectives to you, and some really great guests as well. So please send us some feedback. If you would, you can email us at info@freedomstate.us, or there's a form you can fill out on the website, freedomstate.us. We'd love it if you'd make recommendations on any content that you most enjoy or content that you'd like to see. Yeah, we're pretty open. So just let us know what you'd like to see and what you'd like to hear. And support us financially if you're able.
And interact with us. I love that. Interact with us. We want to interact with you. We want to know what your concerns are. And we want to continue to expand your voice everywhere. And with the new technology that we're developing, we're going to be able to do that. But if you like the state of freedom, if it feeds you, if it's something that you enjoy and look forward to, donate to the state of freedom, support the state of freedom so that we can continue to protect you, continue to expand your voice. Because as I said earlier, Danielle, there isn't another voice in the state of Louisiana like ours. And I say that with all humility, and only because of God's grace and my partnership with you we've been able to accomplish what we have already accomplished. But if you like us, share, subscribe, and donate. And if you do that each day, we will move forward with another step to preserve the great state of freedom in Louisiana.
Amen. It's been a while since you got to say that one. I love it.
Amen.
Thanks for listening to The State of Freedom. To stay on top of all the calls to action or find resources we mentioned today, check out the show notes for the episode. The scripture reading and reflection for today's episode are on our website, freedomstate.us. If you'd like to support the show financially, you can do that on our website as well. Again, that's freedomstate.us. If you'd prefer to give by mail, you can send a check to the State of Freedom at P.O. Box 861, Berg, Louisiana 70343. If you own a business and would like to support our show by advertising, please email us at info@freedomstate.us. To get involved with Louisiana Citizen Advocacy Group, visit lacag.org, lacag.org, or email Chris at chris@lacag.org. If you're enjoying the show, please subscribe and share it and give us a 5-star rating in the reviews. Thanks again, everybody. We'll see you next time.